see.
So Erica, where did you buy your apartment?
I actually rent in the same building I bought. It's a very long story, but in Nolita on actually right above Elizabeth Street Garden on Elizabeth and Prince.
Nice.
Yeah. And then my office, we actually just took over 2 full floors in Soho on Grand and Green. So yeah.
Good.
I do a morning walk through the neighborhood every day.
Oh, that's nice. Well, here, look.
Okay, hi everyone. It's now 6:30. This is the CB2 Schools and Education Committee meeting. I'm just going to wait for a few more committee members to join. I see Emily. Welcome, Emily. I see Janine. Let's give it like, I don't know, 3 more minutes and then we'll start.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's good to see Janine and Mara.
Okay,
Hi,
Cheryl,
team.
you're gonna be co-host.
You ready? Good. So one of the highlights of my last week was I was walking along and Emily called me out. Yes, it was wonderful.
I know, it was so nice. I love that, like re-bumping into people. It's like, I know the pandemic is still very real for some people, but there is this sense of,
Yes.
you know, out and aboutness.
Yeah, and 20 years ago, I fell and broke my pelvis, and I was on the Bleecker Street, and immediately Frida Bradlaugh was there and said, "Keen, what's wrong?" Da, da, da. I mean, it was just like, this is my group here. Oh, very nice to realize you are walking the streets.
Mark, could you give Emily, she needs to be able to share her slides, and I'm not able to give her that permission.
Oh, no, it looks like I
I
have
think
it.
you mean
You
Cheryl.
have
I
it?
did that. Why don't you give it a try? I did that when I first opened up the meeting.
Yeah,
Oh, okay. All right.
Yep,
it
there you
looks
go.
like I can. Great.
Oh, okay, cool.
Awesome. Let me just get this down and I can do a slideshow. Great. Thank you guys
Okay.
so much for hosting me. I appreciate it.
Let's just give it, what is it? 1 more minute and then I'll start. Let's see. Okay, it's now 6:33 and I'm gonna start our meeting. My name is Patricia Laria and I'm the committee chair of the Schools and Education Committee. Dr. Cheryl Wu is our vice chair. I'm just gonna name our committee chair, our committee board members. Keen Burgers, I see. Rich Cachapolo. I see Mar Fitzgerald, Matt Metzger. And there may be a few more joining us. We have Jeanine Kiley, who is our former CB2 board chair, joining us. I see also another former board chair, Carter Booth. I guess we can promote him. Let me just go over our agenda for this evening. Is a presentation from Literacy Academy Collective, which designs and supports New York City Public Schools to bring evidence-based literacy instruction into the classroom. Our speaker is Emily Helmstrom, but before we have Emily start, I have some housekeeping rules. Please be respectful to whoever is speaking. Do not write derogatory comments in chat. We will keep the Zoom chat function open as long as this is adhered to throughout the meeting. Attendees will be on mute. Due to time constraints, we may not be able to answer all questions. And I just want to welcome Emily Helmstrand, and we can begin our meeting. Go ahead, Emily. Oh, you're muted.
There we go. Sorry, I put this down. So excellent. Thank you guys so much for hosting me. And I know many of you in different situations with different hats, but tonight I am here as a co-founder of the Literacy Academy Collective. We are a group of parents who all had children who were struggling to read and came together to found the first district public school actually in the nation that is specifically designed to serve students with dyslexia, language-based learning disabilities, and struggling readers and writers. So I'm here to tell you a little bit about sort of the literacy landscape in the city right now, and sort of answer any questions. But also, I'm gonna take you on a journey through our lens of what's happening, which I think will get to the sort of the broader landscape. So happy to answer any questions with regard to what's going on citywide. Oops, sorry, just want to start off by saying that at LAC, and for many of you, you will recognize that this is one of the most significant civil rights issue in New York City right now. The literacy rates are really troubling, in particular for Black and Brown students. And basically, if you are locked out of literacy, it has a severe impact on how you experience school in general. So the NAACP has come out and said that this is really something that we all ought to be focused on. And specifically, we are actually failing our dyslexic students currently in the system that we have. Basically, we have sort of definitely some changes that are starting to happen, but things are very much in their infancy, and progress is slow, particularly teachers. There's not a lot of teacher training that's going on. Teachers are not coming out of higher ed institutions understanding how to teach reading in evidence-based practices. If you want to get your child into a place that can, if your child has dyslexia, which even just getting a diagnosis is very, very difficult, then taking the steps to get your child into a place where they can be taught to read can be extremely costly. A neuropsych can be upwards of $7,000 to $10,000. Hiring a lawyer to sue the city, paying for tutoring, paying for a private special education setting. These things are all out of reach for the vast majority of people in the public school system. If you are able to access those systems, they are only in the private. There is one charter model out in Staten Island, but really we are working within a wait to fail system, and the system is failing a lot of students. And the consequences are severe. We looked at a study in a Rikers Island literacy study, believe it or not, and it basically showed that 60 to 80% of incarcerated individuals, young men between 19 and 21, have reading and writing disabilities. So this is really has a, we talk about the school to prison pipeline. If you have dyslexia or a language-based learning disability, the line is very direct. I know dyslexia is in the air these days. A lot of people are talking about it, but just so that we're grounded together in a definition, dyslexia is a specific learning disability that is neurobiological in origin. That means that literally your brain functions differently. The areas and regions that light up when learning how to read are very different from somebody who will go on to become a fluent reader. Dyslexia affects anywhere from 10 to 20% of the population. It does occur on a continuum, so it can be more or less severe, and it does have a genetic component, so it does run in families. Dyslexia doesn't go away, but it can be remediated in that basically there is an evidence-based explicit systematic instruction called structured literacy that can, if caught early enough, can teach students how to read. So this is something called the simple view of reading. And it's sort of a simple way to understand a very complex problem. Obviously, teaching students how to read is very, very complex and difficult. But if we look at, there are sort of two parts to learning to read. There is the decoding, or the word recognition, and the comprehension. Obviously, we want to get to comprehension, but the two of those together equal reading. But if you notice, it is a multiplicative equation. So decoding times comprehension equals reading. So if you're not comprehending, obviously you're not reading, but this is very much based in science. If you are not decoding, you are also not reading. So it seems very simple, but this is really rooted in science. So we cannot just tackle the comprehension part. We also have to tackle the decoding part. Otherwise, your child is not reading. And lest we think that this is only a phonics problem, you know, this very simple infographic also is very much rooted in evidence-based science. And it really is showing that every single one of these strands on the reading rope, there's a woman named Hollis Scarborough, who actually is a huge researcher a reading researcher, basically. And she identified these strands. They all have to be taught, and children they have to get every single one of these strands of the reading rope with increasingly strategic and increasing automaticity, and they wrap together to make reading. So we're not just talking about phonics. So Literacy Academy Collective is an organization that is creating this school. You may recognize some of the people in this photo, Janine and Akila, myself, and a number of other, some of you may know Naomi Pena as well, over in School District 1. Community Board 3, came together because we all had struggling readers and knew that this was a major problem. We were constantly hearing from parents who were saying, hey, I heard you know, what do I do next? Coming to us. I actually sat on the CEC for District 2 and founded the Students with Disabilities Committee, and constantly hearing the same stories over and over again. It was very clear that this was a systemic problem that needed to change. So we decided, based on our knowledge of sort of the school system, that a standalone school was really the way to affect the greatest change in the shortest amount of time. I say shortest amount of time. I will say we have been working on this for almost 4 years now. And finally, just this past April, got the green light to go forward with a standalone school. It will be in the South Bronx. Basically, we said, you know, wherever we are needed most, we will go. And certainly the South Bronx, it is where the need was really the most acute, even though this is an issue across the city. We decided to tackle a place that really had a lot of systemic problems going on at the same time. And we felt like this could really make change. So basically, the school is designed to offer this type of instruction in what's called a tier 1 setting. So tier 1 means that everyone in the school will actually get this instruction. So we embed consistent and purposeful practices that support both social emotional learning, executive functioning needs, but also the instructional needs. Not only will these instructional needs happen during the ELA period, but also they'll be woven throughout the other periods of the day. So in science and social studies, some of the content and background knowledge will be woven in, but also the explicit instruction in literacy will be taught through those subjects as well. We also will have math, lest you mathies fear. We will be teaching math, but also in a direct and explicit way, with a heavy emphasis on skills-based learning. So these are some of the components of our model. We call it an acceleration model because basically we meet kids where they are. And I can show you some data that we have out of our pilot. Basically, because it is an intensive instruction throughout the day in literacy, there is an acceleration that happens that allows students who are far behind in their literacy skills to acquire these skills in a rapid way. So we meet students where they are and we accelerate them towards where they need to go. As I mentioned, literacy is woven in instruction across the day. And, that can look like science and social studies, but it also can be in gym. Our gym teacher will be trained in the ways of structured literacy. We can stop and say, volleyball, that's a compound word. How does that go together? What are we breaking down? All of the ways in which we teach literacy can also happen, throughout the day. We have a commitment to equity. Not only are we going to places where we are needed the most, but we also have a commitment in our hiring practices, in who we serve. We will be a Title I school. So we are making sure that we really are going to communities where we are needed the most and serving students who need this the most, who previously were locked out of access on all levels. So integrated supports, what that looks like is not only will we be having literacy components throughout the day, but we'll also be having a model that includes social emotional learning from a profile of somebody who is struggling to read, either with a language-based learning disability or just struggling. But what does that look like? What are the comorbid conditions that go along with dyslexia, ADHD, anxiety, some of these other things that we know are co-occurring when you have a language-based learning disability or are struggling to read. And those will also be integrated. Teachers will be receiving direct professional development so that they can understand also what these profiles look like. Same with executive functioning. We know that students who struggle with literacy also have a very large need when it comes to executive functioning. So these things will be integrated throughout the day. Of course, culturally responsive. And for those of you for whom this is near and dear, specifically, culturally responsive, and I can show you on slides later. Not only does it mean culturally representative, but also there is a deep need for students to experience academic success. That is one of the first pillars of culturally responsive and sustaining education. And we have found that that is true in our pilot, and I can talk a little bit more about that later. Same with the training. So this is one of the biggest components that we've brought into our school is that our teachers need to be highly trained. We offer that during the summer, but also we have what's called a PROS contract for teachers, which means that the schedule will be altered slightly and in order to allow for professional development throughout the year. This is another infographic. Some of you might have seen this before, but it's called the Ladder of Reading. And it looks kind of simple and childish, but it actually also is an infographic that is deeply rooted in science and research. And it basically shows the levels of reading that happen on this continuum. So if you look at the top, there is this green section, and students in this green section, basically reading comes what seems like rather naturally. It's the same neurological passageways that are affected in the brain, but they're relatively open, and that includes about 5 to 10% of students. They need just sort of basically, it's the kind of student who just, they don't even remember learning how to read, they just read. Then there's this sort of light green with basic broad instruction in a gen ed setting. It's about 35% of the population will learn to read. They can benefit from a structured literacy, but they don't necessarily absolutely need it in order to learn how to read. And then if you'll see, basically 40 to 45% of readers, basically, if you look on the infographic, they must have a structured literacy approach, meaning explicit direct instruction in the components of the reading rope, systematic, and they need a code-based learning in order to reach fluency and automaticity. And then at the bottom, this is really where South Bronx Literacy Academy, SBLA, will live, sort of for students for whom not only will they need this setting, but they will need this setting with many repetitions. And that's why this separate school setting. This is what I was talking about a little bit earlier. If you see, Gloria Ladson Billings created a CRSE, and she sort of created these 3 pillars. And a lot of times we talk about pillar B and pillar C, which are incredibly important. But she puts students must experience academic success in order to access. There's a reason that pillar is there first. And really, it's because without pillar A, students really can't get to pillar B and pillar C that are so important. Whoops. And you know what, actually, I thought I had a different slide, but for those of you who have heard of Zaretta Hammond, she also is deeply involved and writes about and researches CRSE. And she really talks about the neuroscience of trust. And basically what we find is when students know that they are going to be supported in a setting and not going to be left on their own to figure things out, they develop a bond with their teacher that is really, really strong. And she also talks about that as one of the starting places of CRSE. And we really heard about that in our pilot this year. Teachers felt that they were bonded to their students in a way that they actually had never experienced before, even though some of them were having 10, 15, 20 years of teaching. So they really understood that basically there was a trust that was formed because students knew that they would never be left on their own to figure things out. And so they started to gain this trust of their teachers, and it allowed them actually to experience this sort of self-confidence actually to do things on their own as they gained that trust with their teacher. So just wanted to show some of the drivers of budget-wise that we negotiated with the DOE. These were like hard-fought battles. Basically, we do have a smaller class size. We basically have 18 students in the class with 2 teachers. The way that we got a 1-to-6 ratio is that we were able to negotiate for 2 speech and language pathologists per, one speech and language pathologist that is dedicated per 2 classrooms. So that means that during the ELA block that we will be able to basically have sort of these very small groups that will be structured by skills-based groupings. So homogeneous skills-based groupings with a 1-to-6 ratio. As I mentioned before, we will be able to have these fully programmatic services, which means that the speech and language pathologist is not pulling students out of class, which means that they're missing classes. How it works right now in classrooms is that if you have a speech and language pathologist, if you have an OT, any kind of SETS teacher, you're pulled out of classrooms and you're missing social studies, gym, any number of things in order to get these services. Instead, the DOE recognized that these needed to happen in the classroom. It was a huge win for us. And then again, they actually included money in our budget for increased professional development and instructional support. We feel like these were really enormous wins, and you can see them actually. It's called a SAM memo in the budgets, and basically it's called an LAC SAM. So if you've heard of, like, for example, the ASD Nest program, they have a special it's called the special allocation memo in the budget. We got that too, which is just really, really exciting. So basically, one of the other enormous benefits that was given to us sort of at the end of the last administration was they allowed us to do a pilot this year at PS 161 in the South Bronx. We had started out our very first summer, we did a teacher training pilot in District 4. Then we were able to repeat that training this past summer in District 7. And then in the middle, you'll see that we did this sort of model classroom pilot. So basically, in this model classroom, we were allowed to go into an existing school, and we sort of basically took over 2 classrooms, 2nd and 3rd grade. We essentially took over their ICT classroom. We hired 4 teachers outside of their school. They allowed us to hire them. And then we also took 2 existing PS 161 teachers, and we trained them over the summer in that practicum that I just mentioned in evidence-based literacy instruction. It's a program called PAF that they use at the Windward School, which is a private special education school. We then basically took over these 2 classrooms of 30 students. 28 out of the 30 students were free and reduced price lunch. We believe that actually 30 out of 30 are, but 2 people did not fill out the form. 9 out of the 30 students were English language learners, and 14 out of the 30 students were received special education services through an IEP. As I mentioned, we had these 6 teachers, so 3 in each classroom. And basically, when we got into the classrooms, we didn't really know at what level students would be coming to us. As we said, this was just sort of basically an ICT classroom, and we thought that there would be really a wide range of skill abilities. So we set out by basically doing a benchmark assessment. What we found actually was there was not a wide range of skills, but that basically close to, 16 of our 30 students were not able to recognize or decode any words on our placement test. And in fact, 20 of our 30 students were basically pre-alphabetic, which means that they could not match letters with letter sounds. And these are 2nd and 3rd grade students. 4 of our 3rd grade students could not say the letters in their own name. So we're talking like really, really behind in skills. Some of this definitely had to do with the pandemic for sure. But some of it is really what we're seeing across the city in with literacy rates, basically being 2 to 3 and sometimes 4 years behind as you get older and older in these basic literacy skills. So basically we did also an Acadians placement test, and the majority of the students were at basically beginning of kindergarten level in phonics and phonemic awareness. Only 3 students started the year demonstrating end of kindergarten proficiency. And remember, these are 2nd and 3rd grade, so that's end of kindergarten. And no writing skills. Students could not hold a pencil. They could not form letters. If they were forming letters, it was more akin to drawing than actually creating letters. And you can sort of see that here on the chart. This is basically the left side is the before the classroom pilot. We took an assessment in, I believe this is progress after 6 months. So I think it's around March. We did a mid-year assessment. Basically, this is an assessment that it was within the curriculum. So this is a PAF placement test. So it is basically what we would look to see how students are progressing through the actual curriculum. And basically, we found that, as you can see, students, the majority of the students were progressing more than expected. Some students were approaching, and I think only 2 students were below, or 1 student, excuse me, was below the expected rate. And remember, this is a regular ICT classroom, so that could be that student had other needs that our pilot was not necessarily supporting. So basically, at this rate, so it's basically at 6 months, students were progressing at about a year pace. So it's tremendous progress. Oops, sorry. Sorry, this is just the data spoken, but basically, essentially, students should gain about 1.1 additional word per week if we were progressing at the standard rate. Our students were progressing at a 6.97 words per week on average. And we checked this with a national researcher, a fellow by the name of Devin Kearns. And one of the things we wanted to check is, was this rate of improvement something that you would see if you had older kids? You would expect, well, maybe their rate of improvement would be greater. He actually told us that the opposite was true, that as you get older, you actually tend to see that your rate of progression on these things gets less. As the brain starts to become more, basically the window of literacy rate and elasticity within the neurons, basically, they start to become more formed, and acquiring these skills is harder. So we count this data as really quite unbelievable, and we're really very, very proud of it. And this is just March data. We expect to get end of year data shortly. This is just another way of showing this data. This would be a regular rate of improvement for kindergarten. This, obviously, our students were way beyond kindergarten. And this is essentially at this second to last green line is where we started doing our assessment. Sorry, this is actually in a nationally normed, not just a curriculum-based assessment, but this is a nationally normed assessment. So this is slightly different data, but you can see where our pilot starts. This very gentle sloping red line, essentially we took, this is a very generously sloping line. We don't have any data from before that, so we did it on what a norm would be, even though really essentially our students were flatlined. So this was being exceedingly generous to what came before, but you see the very marked progress that is being made after we started assessments with a nationally normed progress monitoring. just to show you a little bit about what we're doing, because structured literacy does not only touch reading, but it also goes into writing. We know that reading and writing go together, very much affect each other. This is, you can see the date. This is a student very much at the beginning of our practicum. You know, very, very simple sentences. This is also highly structured and scaffolded, even at this point. So teachers would be very much scaffolding this sentence, Dan hid the pin. But you can see the handwriting. And then this is in February assignment. This is the same student. You can see the sentence structure. This still would be scaffolded, but you can see the student is starting to learn clauses because Ruby was brave because she went into an all-white school with guards. Ruby was brave because she helped stop segregation. So this is basically a writing unit that they would do where they would read, do a read aloud on Ruby Bridges, and then learn some basic, it's called but, because, and so sentence. So it's sort of deep sentence structure work where you're learning, you know, different types of sentences using but, because, and so clauses. So it would be, you know, the teacher would give a sentence starter. Ruby was brave, but Ruby was brave because Ruby was brave. So, and students would be asked to fill in. But you can see the change. There's lots of learnings that I can go into and answer questions. I'm doing so much talking, so I just want to let you guys know. Obviously, Mayor Adams is made this a huge part of his platform. And I know there is a wide array of views on who Mayor Adams is, what he is doing. But if you've ever heard him speak on dyslexia and his own story, he is deeply connected to this through his own personal journey in the public school system. And you know, he's very, very passionate, and it shows. So we feel very fortunate that this work is being taken far. And I just want to point out that, excuse me, in addition to opening our school this year, we are expanding, and we are doing a teacher training pilot in District 1, in the school District 1, which is on the Lower East Side. It is very much like the training that we do up in District 7 of our actual teachers who will be teaching in the schools, but we know that one school will not be enough. So the idea is to really take these teacher training practices and see how can we expand them? How can we do this work in different spheres, not just within a standalone school setting, but in order to bring them into different types of settings so that teachers can adapt them both in their schools, but also potentially for after school or their own summer. So we just found out today that we received a grant from Trinity. DOE is matching those dollars in District 1. We will have it's a 6-week structured literacy class for students, but we will also do deep training for District 1 teachers. We'll have 6 teachers from 3 different schools, and they will be partnered with the Windward School teachers in doing this practicum work, which means that they will have not only coaching, but they will co-teach with a Windward teacher in order to really give them direct skills and feedback in the moment during this practicum setting. We'll take students who are in 2nd and 3rd grade and who are in the red in their literacy skills. And then we hope that this program will morph into a sort of a targeted after-school intervention program within District 1. This is just, you know, sort of where our Literacy Academy Collective is growing. We, in addition to wanting to grow this on a teacher training sort of sphere, we also feel that we would like to have basically a network of schools. We would like to see basically a literacy academy collective school in every borough. And then just to round it all out, these are the real focus for us is we have the school development, we have the training sites. Community engagement is a huge piece of the work that we do, and obviously identifying new school sites for us. And that is it. Really, I can.
Oh, thank you, Emily. It's good to have advocates like yourself doing the good work. Thanks for that amazing presentation. And I'm blown away with the pilot program to see how far they came in 6 months. Wow. And you said it was just a group of parents that came together to form LAC. And how, I mean, it seems like it took are your kids benefiting from this now?
No. In fact, none of our kids are. Thankfully, we were all able to somewhat get our kids to where, to a setting that they need to be in. But even that, I think all of us, as we sort of went on this journey, knew that getting our students to where they needed to be was a tremendously difficult task, even in spite certain privileges, certain abilities to, speak the language, to have a certain, financial means, just knowing systems. Like each of us had our own privilege that we used to enable us to get our students to where they needed to go. We knew that was not the case for just a vast majority of people who are interfacing with the system. And so we knew that there needed to be a more system-wide change, even if that would not directly help our own scholars, our own children.
Thank you, Emily. Before I take questions from our committee, I also want to acknowledge we have 2 new CB2 members in our windows. That I see Ann Hager, as well as hi Ann, and Erica Olson, who's also new to the board. Welcome. So this is the point where we take questions from our committee members. So do we have questions for Emily? Okay, Cheryl, go ahead.
Hey, Emily, thank you so much for that great presentation. I was so happy to hear that. And, when you were talking about the kids that don't even recognize the letters in their own names, that really just broke my heart. So really, thank you so much for spearheading and among with the other 6 parents. I've heard about your initiative for years, and I'm so happy to see it happening. So, hopefully we'll be able to replicate this model in all boroughs. I think that would be really amazing. I mean, even my own network of physician women, I can think of 2 moms already with 2 kids, 1 each. I guess my question is, I love that you said, I forget the name of the woman who said the 3 pillars. The very first pillar has to be academic success, where there's a setting in which that these children or all children can thrive, right? But they have to be different settings. But I guess my question for you is kind of like a fun one. I try to see, I feel like our school system isn't quite built in the right way for everybody, to be truly inclusive. But my question for you is, what is the thing that you see, at least in your own kids or kids you've seen, that's sort of like their superpower? Because it's sort of like, I want to flip it on the head a little bit, because neurodivergence is actually a superpower in a form, right? So that's my question for you. Thank you.
You bet. And thank you. It definitely, I think that every child has something that they can offer. And so oftentimes we, we see these as problems. And, I think that we struggle with this all the time when we're designing this, right? We are talking about how to make things better and different. And so in doing so, we often will talk about the problems and what kids are struggling with. That being said, I think that there are any number of superpowers that our kids possess. I don't think that there is one. Like, I know I've heard people say, oh, dyslexics have a different creativity, or, you know, see things in different ways. I think a lot of that through research has been sort of debunked. Like, of course, there are creative dyslexics. There are, you know, really linear, like non-creative dyslexics. There are, you know, there are people who, but definitely every student who walks through our door has a superpower. And I feel like the thing that is encouraging me the most is to see these teachers feel revived, and the efficacy in their own practice that has basically allowed them to reconnect with why they became teachers, which for almost every one of them is to find the superpower in every one of their students. And I think that so many teachers have not felt empowered in the classroom to reach every student. And that can be very, very, it can be frustrating and really, really hard. And you can get that burnout. And I think, even though I think our teachers, when they talk about it, they've worked harder than they've ever worked in their entire career, they're not actually experiencing burnout. They're, you know, of course they're tired and they've worked hard, but they're not experiencing burnout from, I can't do this, I'm not reaching my students. So to me, I feel like their job is to say, oh my gosh, now I'm reaching these kiddos and they're feeling this power to be able to read. They can also access, and we found this, and then I'll definitely take your question, Keen. We found a lot of behaviors that were happening at the beginning of the year, which were deeply connected to how students saw themselves, how they, like how they saw themselves in the classroom, what they experienced. And by sort of mid-year, kids who were regulars in the principal's office were not anymore. They were actually able to stay in the class. Yeah, maybe not in their seat the whole time, but they're actually able to be a part of the classroom in ways that they had never been able before. So I think that, again, even though it's highly structured, and some people are like, oh my gosh, there's like, you walk into our classrooms, there's desks in rows, like it does not look like the typical progressive classroom that you might imagine, but kids are experiencing this. I think, you know, progressive means reach every student. They're feeling reached. So for them, they, I think, can explore their superpower in ways that they couldn't before.
That's beautifully said. Thank you.
Keen.
I mean, I agree with Cheryl. It is so impressive. I'm blown away by how much you've done and how, you know, that in fact, within this city that seems so brutal sometimes to public school kids, that you've found this wonderful light. And so I'm thinking that you personally, Emily, and of course I know a couple other people in your 7 are incredible people, but you know, the real question is, how did you do it? How did you manage to get the Board of Education and a school in the South Bronx with teachers who probably they're just normal people? I mean, how did you find incredible coming together, you know, lightning in the sky or something? I don't know. So tell me a little bit more of how you managed to get to this point, because I am so impressed.
Oh.
And I think, oh, well, it must be just Emily and Janine. They're amazing.
Well, listen, I do think, you know, perseverance and grit, and those of you who know Janine Kiley know that she's a very special person. And I think that there was a coming together of some very special people who did not take no for an answer, in a very kind way, but in a very real way. I think that what was very interesting to all of us, and we remarked on it a lot, is what was the most difficult thing about our journey is we didn't actually get a lot of no's. A lot of people said, oh my gosh, this is amazing. What a great idea. So it was sort of like fighting against Jello, where like if you get a no, then you're like, okay, let's keep, but we couldn't tell where the next move would be. So we kept having these meetings and they'd be like, we love this, but we couldn't get any like traction. But we kept showing up. And I will say, there was a moment 2 summers ago. So it was sort of at the end of the first full year of COVID where they were trying to open the schools, and very difficult year. And I want to give like major props to the Windward School. That is one of these private special education schools. And it is a, very much a private, Upper East Side, I really want to say like very white privileged space. But they have been just incredible, not just in like saying that they would support us, but in the doing. They allowed us to do a practicum. And when I say practicum, I know that's kind of a wonky education word. So this was really like where we mounted this 5-week side-by-side co-teaching situation. So basically the teachers, we got 3 DOE teachers, and someone named Andrew Fletcher, who was in the DOE, said, I'm going to help you guys. I'm going to hook you up with a superintendent. And the superintendent said, yes, took a chance on us. Let's do this tiny thing. So it was in this like doing action sort of thing instead of just speaking, where we said, let's try this. Because they kept saying, well, these are not our children. They would go up to the Windward School to visit and they'd say, well, yes, that looks nice, but that's for private school students. And that's not our population, all these ways. And, there is this way in which I felt very in my gut, like that there was this way in which they were saying our students can't do that. They can't learn that way, or I don't know what it was, but they just could not see it. When we finally got, and these were regular DOE teachers who signed up, and let me talk about burnout. They had just taught in this insane setting with masks on all year. And they also took a leap of faith and said, we'll take this course. They did a 16-hour course, and then they taught side by side with these Windward co-teachers. And I mean, we were really green at this point. We didn't know what we were doing. We were like, putting it together as we were doing it. And this was in District 4, and students basically in 5 weeks doubled their oral reading fluency rate on average. And that was all students who were in the red and a nationally normed Acadian screener. And we, at the very last day, one of the deputy chancellors came and saw us. Again, this is the persistence. We were like, you've got to come. You've got to come. Oh yes, I'll come. We just kept, and she came and she visited and she saw it. She was like, oh my God, these are our students and they are doing it. I mean, you heard kids talking about like prefixes and suffixes and really understanding like how words were formed and made. And these were kids in a Title I, East Harlem, 99% free and reduced lunch setting, doing skills-based learning that was enabling them to access literacy in a way that they could never do it before. And I think it was like a lightning bolt. I think for the first time, they were like, oh my gosh, this really is real. And we saw kids after that practicum. We had one little girl who we sat down to assess her at the beginning, and she was like, I'm not going to take this assessment. I cannot read. and you cannot make me do this. And we accepted her anyway, because we sort of assumed that the reason that she didn't want to do it is because she couldn't read. And at the end of this 5 weeks, she came into that room and she said, I remember you, and I know what you're here for, and I am ready to take this test. And she sat down, and it was a list of words, and she started going. And after a minute, you're supposed to stop. And she was like, no way, I want to keep going. And she went to the end of the page, and our assessor was like, wow. And she was like, I want to keep this because I want to show my teacher and I want to show my mom what I can do now. And it was really profound. Her whole countenance, her whole posture, just who she was changed. And yeah, I think the administration saw that. And then of course they said, great, we want it everywhere. We'll train teachers in 2 hours and we'll just mount it. And we also said, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to let you wreck this. And we also held fast. But then it became a negotiation, and the new administration came in, and there were some hard fought battles. And then we also learned when we didn't win. And they won some battles that, with admission that we wanted. And in some ways they were right, and we were better for it. So yeah, it's definitely in the doing.
And the persistence, so good.
For sure.
I continue to be very impressed.
Well, thank you so much, Keen. That means an awful lot. Anne.
Hi, I know I'm new, and so I feel a little bit weird volunteering, but for 2 reasons, I want to say a huge thank you. One, I have a child with a language-based disability that's actually entering the public schools next year, pre-K. So I'm preparing for the first time with I have 3 children, my first one to have any kind of disability. And I'm on the beginning of this path, but also I was a teacher. My first teaching experience, my first few years teaching were in the South Bronx.
Oh, wow.
And at the beginning, I was told as a young teacher that I had to teach a certain set of curriculum that didn't work for my students. And I ended up abandoning it because it obviously wasn't working. And as a good teacher, you know to do that. But I didn't have the training and how to do it. And so hearing this, it's just sort of like, it's inspirational. I wish that I'd had the opportunity to have this kind of training so that I could really meet those kids' needs. I feel like I did my best under the circumstances.
Of course.
And so this leads to the question, which actually you just sort of referenced about wanting to have it go wider. So obviously you want to do this right, and you want to do it. I taught at a school that was a new school, teaching in a new way again, later on, that we made a very intentional choice not to expand too quickly. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts in terms of expansion? Because obviously this is something that sounds like it doesn't just benefit a small population, it benefits a huge population. You went into an ICT class where this was not kids that were assessed to have specific disabilities. And obviously it had a huge impact on the entire class. What are your thoughts on how this can expand more broadly over, maybe the next decade?
Thank you so much, Anne. And thank you for being open about your teaching experience. We find that teachers across, like so many teachers they get into this for all of the right reasons, and it's not their fault. We say it right out from the beginning. It is not their fault. Teachers are not taught this in their their graduate programs. And that is a huge focus of advocacy right now. Why would you be have teachers paying, and taking out loans and all of the things that we say about, our higher education, and yet they're not coming out prepared to teach our students. It is unfair to them, and it is unfair to our students. So that has to change. We feel that LAC is basically operating from like a top down, bottom up. We talk to teachers all the time, and we want to spread the word, but we can't be everywhere all at once. And we want because we specifically are serving basically the population for whom this is the most difficult, they need the most repetitions, we feel that teacher training and getting sort of intensive teacher training, we just will compromise, but we won't compromise, you know? And so we know that teachers deserve to have settings and training where they're really supported, paid for their time, and coached and in the right way, in a low stakes setting where they're not being judged. This is not affecting their performance reviews. So we have found summer to be a really great place to train students. Train teachers. And so yeah, there's like this sort of self-teacher training component to what we're doing. That being said, you know, we're small but mighty. And we do want to expand, but we also want to recognize that the DOE is working on this too. They are trying to scale. We have the largest school district in a school system in the country. And they are working on ways of, you know, getting this right. One of the ways that they have started to tackle this is by saying, we're only going to use 3 curriculum, which a lot of people bristle at because they're like, oh my gosh, you're just choosing 3 and telling teachers what to do. And it's hard, right? But they need to have some sense of control over what is going on in buildings. And basically, before this, you know, I was on the CEC D2, and we had a sort of a meeting with the chancellor. They do it every year. And I got to ask a question of Chancellor Carranza, which is like, you know, what are you doing about curriculum? And he said, listen, I've got 1,800 schools and I have 1,800 different curriculum. That is not acceptable for our students. Like, it just is too difficult to control. So they're taking these steps. Obviously, there's going to be a backlash. We say it's not perfect. It's not a panacea. There still needs to be training. There still needs to be support and all these things, but we feel like it is a step in the right direction because these curriculum are rooted in science, in evidence-based practices. We wish that there was an even heavy, or I guess, like from our perspective, if you are trained in how to assess students and see where they are in their skills, in their literacy skills, then presumably you have good teachers like you who are saying, hey, listen, my kids don't know this. They need more than 30 minutes of skills. So they differentiate, right? For students who only need 30 minutes, great. That's that green, you know, top of the ladder of reading. Fantastic. For kids who are in the orange, they might be more than 30 minutes. So as long as schools are willing to go further and deeper and better, great. For us, we're really focused on that red band. So the more we get this tier 1 instruction out there in the schools that exist, the better it's going to be for us to find the students who are appropriate for a really more intensive setting. And then we just have to support, you know, other ways that the DOE is doing this. They're really trying very hard to do this right. They are doing some teacher trainings. I'm not saying they're getting everything right, and God knows those budget cuts are really tough, and everyone should be advocating for any budget to go towards this types of teacher training and making sure that there is enough for teachers to get trained because they need it. I hope that answers your question. But really on our timeline, I would just say, so we're doing this D1 pilot, which we hope our idea is to expand that into a sort of an after school. And we'd like to get that up and running in after school so that potentially, if that works in an after school setting during the year, then possibly teachers during the year could take the 3-day training and then do their practicum work during the year in an after school setting. And that would allow them to, in a low stakes setting, but not wait to summer to be co-teaching with those. And we've committed to that. That was part of our grant from Trinity, was to say, hey, listen, not only do we want to mount this as an after school, but we want to then see if we can get it solid enough so that by spring, we say, let's take 6 more District 1 teachers, train them, and then put them into this after school setting, and then have that be a practicum event, and we'll get the coaching going there. That's it for District 1. And then we're looking to Brooklyn, that possibly we have a training program this summer, but that next summer we would be instituting a training program in Brooklyn with the idea of opening the following year a school, and a standalone. It would be like Central Bronx Literacy Academy that following year. Matt.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Patricia.
No, it's fine. Go ahead, Matt.
So I have 7 questions written down thus far. And I will have the chair cut me off once people are ready to murder me. Emily, like, I've been debating whether I curse or not right now, but like, holy moly, like seriously, that is like gut wrenching in some of the parts. And just like, I mean, Bernie Madoff-esque, is the data real? Like, is it
That is real.
crazy?
That is legit. We did not believe the
Crazy.
data. We took it to a national researcher because we were like, is this real?
So my first question is, was my reading of the data correct? Are there second graders that can't read at the level of a kindergartner?
Oh, yes.
Okay,
many.
so I feel like that's like emergency exit handle number 1,
Mhm.
which is like, is that that's a problem?
Oh, yeah.
That's happening everywhere.
Yes. That is
So
not
yeah.
not South Bronx alone. That is, there are huge swaths of children across the city for whom this is the case.
And I'm sorry if I didn't pick this up, were the students that you selected in the study representative of geographically, like, is it just like a slice of students, or is it very specifically students?
So basically,
some
I would
type
say, this was a slice of students. So we basically took a random District 7 public school. It was like Joe Schmo public school. I would say they have some of the worst literacy rates in the entire system, but they don't have a corner on the market per se. Like, there are other schools that are just like that. And then we took all the kids who were basically at the bottom. And so basically they have a situation where they have 2 classes per grade. They have a dual language program in Spanish, where actually they have most of the kids who are in that are their most advanced learners. And then we took just their ICT class. So generally speaking, in like a District 2 school, their ICT class, the way it's supposed to be set up is it's about, there's about 60% typical gen ed learners and 40% students with IEPs. That is the case. There were only 40% of students with IEPs, but all of them struggled tremendously, so that on a nationally normed scale, they were 2 to 3 years behind in their literacy skills.
Was there a control group?
Well, no. So
I'm not quite. I didn't mean that as a dig at your model, your method.
No, it's not. It was not a study. We
Yeah.
didn't do it as a study. Basically, there are control groups for this type of structured literacy. We were doing a pilot. So basically, in our pilot, we just wanted to say, like, could we train teachers? Could we do like a model classroom that would end up with teachers who are well trained in structured literacy? If this were the case, would students move? That being said, preliminarily, we are hearing that on our end of year benchmark on the nationally normed that this is really raw. We have not confirmed this yet, but what it looks like right now is that we beat the other class. even though we took all of the lowest students in. And by lowest, I don't mean like personality wise. We love
as a neurodivergent person, I accept I know exactly what you mean. Worry not.
Yes. But yes, in their literacy skills, we took the lowest, and we think right now it's looking like we surpassed the skills acquisition of the other class.
It's incredible. Was there added cost? Like, was there a marginal cost above, and what was it?
For sure. So we did this. Now, I would argue that we didn't have to do this. We did it for a reason, and it was a teacher training reason, but we had 3 students in the classroom. Generally, there are 2. So yes, there's a major cost. The reason
3 teachers in the classroom.
Oh, sorry. Yes, 3 teachers. Sorry,
Okay.
3 teachers in a classroom. The reason that we did this was that teachers have 1 prep period and 1 lunch period. We wanted to get an extra so that we could do teacher training. So, and also, I mean, we do also want to do those small homogeneous skills-based groupings, and having somewhere between 6 and 8 is the sweet spot. Like, so we could do 8, but one has 4, things like that. It allows us to play with that. But the main reason is so that for us, these teachers are going to go on and teach, hopefully, at the South Bronx Literacy Academy next year. They will have teachers, trainers within there. So yes, there was an added cost.
So 50% increase above normal on personnel, and like some added upfront cost to train.
Yeah, I mean, and we funded the training. It's like, I would say it was a public-private partnership. DOE definitely put dollars in, which we
At
wanted.
scale. I'm sorry, at scale would be.
But yes. But with the outcomes being that within 2 to 3 years, these students would be up to performing where they need to be in order to access all the rich curriculum that they want to access.
You're leading exactly to where I was going to go, which is how do they get to 2nd grade level? How long does that take? And then once they get to 2nd grade level, is that like they're on a nice trajectory and kind of hands off a little bit, or what kind of?
I would say hands off a little bit. Like, listen, if we did not test these students for dyslexia, we did not, there was no sort of like neuropsychs that were, performed or anything like that. These, so kids could either have dyslexia or not, or other language-based learning disabilities or not. Definitely, there's going to be any range, right? If you have dyslexia, chances are you're probably going to need an IEP as you go through school, not because you haven't accessed literacy, but because these things are tough and the work, gets more complex or difficult. The idea is to arm students with skills that they can use in order to access literacy, but also skills in self-advocacy, so that they know how to approach a teacher when they need extra help, how to say, hey, listen, I need to, sit in the front row. I need to, whatever it is that they need. We also, this is what huge part of our parent engagement strategy is, arming parents with the knowledge that when they go to a different educational setting, they can say, look, my child needs sets. He's going to need extra executive function, so that when he gets into a high school setting, he is, a teacher is sitting down and showing, how to prepare, study skills. Like, all of these things are going to be needed. And as we build our school, they will even further come in. That's what the executive functioning training that I was talking about. These are woven throughout the day, explicitly taught to students, saying like, you need to be looking ahead. You need to be, I would say that for some of our students, they once they're sort of caught up skill wise, they will go on into like less restrictive environments. And we think that they can all, but listen, we think they all can do really, really, really well. Like, back to Cheryl, like, what is their superpower? Once they access literacy, then you decide, like, I think I'm a scientist. I think I'm an artist. I think whatever.
It's sticky though. It stays with them.
Yes. But getting there, I will say this, we are committed to staying on grade level in terms of the content. So one of the things we know with students who can't access reading and writing right away, it doesn't mean that they can't access content. So in social studies and science, we go heavy onto the content-based stuff with lots of read alouds, lots of videos, lots of oral content, because the comprehension is there. But also, if you look at that reading rope, we need background knowledge. We need, again, like there's a lot that goes into reading. And so we pack it in. That's why it's like literacy across the day. And that's why these students are in this accelerated model, because they're getting all of these things throughout the day.
And then last question, which is not study related. What did you learn about the DOE that you didn't know, and about their machinations that you didn't even know before, despite how well knowledgeable you were?
So here's what I learned. So I think that for me personally, I understood on a deeper level what systematic racism looks like up close. I feel like everyone I encountered was a good person. They wanted to do what's right. They thought this was a good idea. What I think personally, and certainly for me, what I learned was that this system is the problem. It's not like the individuals. There was nobody who I was like, well, that person was just, rarely did we meet somebody who was like, I have bad intentions. I'm out here to harm students. Systematically together, so difficult to move systems. So for me personally, like the journey of like when people talk about systemic racism, like I didn't understand. I knew it on an intellectual level. I encountered it on a real level for the first time. Over 3.5 years, 4 years. Very, very tough stuff. That being said, we have one of the largest school systems in the country, or the largest school system in the country. We have a lot of change because these students can do this. They want to do this. Parents want this. We owe this to them, to society, to our city. Like, we have to do this.
Thank you, Emily. In your back and forth with Matt, I just want to remind everyone on our committee that we've passed like 3 resolutions asking for state legislation to mandate early screening for dyslexia for all children. We even passed another resolution called Dyslexia Education, a critical equity issue for New York City students. That we need early screening, curriculum development, teacher training, and so forth. And then also transparency and reform around Carter and Connor cases. That's how we are losing money. The DOE system, education system, is losing money to these parents who are suing the city, the education system, and to put their kids in private school to get that training that Emily was talking about, that is happening. And I'll drop that in the chat so everybody can peruse at their convenience.
We have a really good moment in Albany right now, and I think teacher ed, huge. Also, there's like a task force for dyslexia. Like there's a number, like Brad Hoylman, amazing on this issue. Joanne Simon, Bobby Carroll, Harvey Epstein. I'm just trying to think of like the downtown guys who are really good. Who else am I forgetting, Janine? On the Senate side,
Robert Jackson.
Robert Jackson.
Robert
Yeah.
Jackson.
Robert Jackson, excellent.
And Harvey Epstein.
Harvey Epstein, yep.
Yeah.
And I think Myri.
Yeah.
Irene, I think also is very good on this issue. Anyway, there's like a kind of a confluence, and plus having the mayor being good on this issue, you know, props where props are due. He's making some serious changes that are really, really good.
I also want to say, I like the fact that you're going to roll this out, hopefully in the, you said District 1 to pilot it in the after school. I want that to trickle over to D2, District 2. I mean, I have a story where in middle school with my younger son, he's not dyslexic, but I heard from another parent that he was in 8th grade and the curriculum, I remember you don't read, there's no read aloud. You don't, like, your teacher would call in a student and tell you, read this passage aloud. There's none of that anymore in the curriculum where you can read aloud. And if the teachers, I don't want to blame teachers, I don't mean to do that, but if that was still part of the curriculum, you could catch some of these
Absolutely.
screen, you know, this is a form of screening to find out like where your child is. And we found out that that child couldn't read and he was in middle school. He was just getting by. And this is a District 2 student. What about handwriting? Handwriting is gone. Nobody teaches handwriting anymore.
Yeah, I mean, and we find that the handwriting is deeply related. It goes to these literacy skills, like as students are forming these letters and then getting in their ear, it's really like this is why we call it multisensory, right? They're forming it with their arm, they're listening to the sound, and they're seeing. It's like all connecting together and converging. Same with the writing in the sentence structures. We're deeply teaching the sentence structures. Well, if you're teaching, then you know that your topic sentence happens at your first level, then you're able to understand that as you're reading, the first sentence in a paragraph is going to be really, really important. Same thing with clauses. As you're reading, students are starting to speak in clauses now in our pilot. They really understand how to form these sentences and make these deeply complex sentences. Again, this all goes together in this learning. So I think you're absolutely right. And it is everywhere, Patricia. And, you know, I know you guys are D2 responsible for District 2. I think that we do need to see these programs expand. I think that there's the ability to expand that within the model that exists, not necessarily, you know, and then once we get you know, hopefully a Manhattan base, and one of the things that you guys could advocate so hard for is that Bleecker Street site, right? That site could be set up, you know, for a middle school, or, you know, we would love that. So
are there any other questions from our committee members before I go to attendees? Any more questions for Emily? No. All right, I'm looking at attendees. Darlene, Jeffrey, no questions? No. All right. Then so usually we transition to business session. Is there anything that we didn't ask that you think we should have asked, or what else could we do to like promote? Oh, go ahead, Keen.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. And what can we do? Besides tell you you're wonderful and we're just so happy that you came, but you know, actually we're a little cog in the system. So
definitely, and you have a role to play. I would definitely say that Bleecker site, I know that there is an issue with a grocery store, and I recognize that is very real for people, but you know, I think there are a lot of empty storefronts for you know, commercial ventures in you know, when we have an offer to have a school, we ought to take it. And these are the reasons why, right? That school could serve so many. It's transit rich hub, and it really could serve as a place for, you know, again, if you know, the LAC school the elementary one is uptown, but then a middle school is downtown, wherever. This could serve a wide population, definitely in middle school. And our model is growing. And if not our model, then other models. So I definitely think that is a number one. I think there are several bills in the legislature right now. Joanne Simon has something, and I can get these to you, Patricia. I'm sorry that I didn't bring them with me. But there's the dyslexia task force from Bobby Carroll. Joanne Simon has something on higher ed. There's just a number of different things that are, paid for neuropsychs by health insurance companies that Brad Hoylman has sponsored. Excellent bill. So yeah, there are a number of ways in which you can help. And then I also think, there is some definite pushback on the mandated curriculum that I would say does not deserve, obviously everyone wants to kick the tires and people should, go through the paces, but these are definitely 2 out of the 3 are very strong curriculum. And I think, I know my own daughter's school uses a heavy TC based curriculum, which we didn't really get into talk about balanced literacy and why it's so bad, but I think there needs to be change, and District 2 has got to make those changes. So pressure to really look at evidence-based curriculum and structured literacy needs to be looked at across the board.
So I don't understand what you're talking about with these 3. Tell me what the 3 are.
Yep. So basically the chancellor came out and said that rolling out over the next couple of years, they're going to have a uniform curriculum. You can choose between 3 curriculum. The curriculum will be for early education. And they are evidence-based curriculum. So basically what that means is that if you are a student, and the 3 curriculum are wit and wisdom, EL, into reading, and I'm going to forget the third one. I can get those for you as well. And I think that, as I said, 2 out of the 3 I know are very, very good, and they have a skills-based component that will allow students to access it on all fronts. And they have excellent books, and they're not, readers or whatever. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of U2 principals who push back against this and get really upset. There is an exemption that can happen, but I think that, there's this motto that if you're reaching 80% of your students, you're doing all right. And that 20% is somebody's kid. In my case, it's my kid. So that's not good enough for me. Science has proven that 95% of students are capable of reading with proficiency, especially if they're reached at a young age. And some people think it's even more. So we have a duty to reach those students.
Okay, Matt, and then Anne. Matt, go ahead.
How closely tied was the change in curriculum to this study?
Well, I think that
if at all,
not directly. Basically, I would say, just to be really perfectly clear, the curriculum that they're mandating is what's called a general curriculum, like a core curriculum. The curriculum that we use is intensive skills-based curriculum. So basically, in the general curriculum, it'll be like 60 minutes of the core curriculum with 30 minutes of skills. We've basically flipped that. And in fact, we're just doing 90 minutes of skills. We make up for that in our read aloud. We have a 45-minute read aloud every day. And we also do make up with heavy content in social studies and science. So we're even different, right? We're going to be pushing to say, hey, look, superintendents and principals, make sure that you're not cheaping out on the skills-based stuff. They haven't mandated skills-based curriculums yet. They have not gone to that, but they will. And I'm glad about it, right? Because it should be evidence-based and it should be rooted directly in science. But those core curriculum is also going to say, hey, listen, these also should be evidence-based and not be doing things like having kids off doing reading by themselves without ever checking in, like what Patricia said, reading aloud. TC and balanced literacy-based practices often have kids silent reading. That leaves a huge number of kids on their own, and teachers don't know where they are. Other huge culprit in this disaster and fiasco is the Fontes and Pinnell system, which is basically garbage. It is absolute garbage. It teaches students to guess. They're repetition-based books that say things like the cat jumps, the frog jumps, the boy jumps, and then they have a picture of a cat, a frog, a boy. These kids are really smart. They show what the picture is, and then they read the word, and then it's a pattern. They're pattern-based books. That's not reading. And studies have shown over and over, if you get a chance, Google the purple paint test with reading, literacy purple paint test, and you'll see when the pictures go away, kids cannot read.
And go ahead. Thank you.
I think Janine answered one of my questions, which was a clarifying question that I wanted to check that I was right in understanding that superintendents choose among these three curriculums they choose for their entire district. Okay, so the one thing I wanted to ask, since it sounds like you know these curriculums pretty well, and I'm on the SLT at PS3, and I had heard some of the teachers had heard from teachers in schools that were piloting the program this year, that at least some of the programs didn't provide much differentiation, and they were very scripted. And so because they were scripted and didn't provide a lot of differentiation, that was a criticism. Is that something that you've seen in these curriculums? Because I don't know them. I did know TC and saw lots of flaws, and TC was certainly not differentiated, at least not when I learned TC. Maybe it's changed over the years. But would you say that that's an issue with these as well?
So definitely they are scripted. I will say that. And here's the thing that I'll say about scripting. I liken it to, and I feel like I can do this with this crowd. I liken it to poetry. There's like the E.E. Cummings style of poetry, and then there's like Shakespeare's sonnets. Shakespeare's sonnets are highly structured, right? You have to have this number of syllables in the line. You must rhyme. And it must be this number of lines. And yet the creativity within that structure is tremendous. However, if you're just starting out, it can be really helpful to write a poem with a lot of scaffolding. And that script is scaffolding. And for teachers, it can say, you need to hit these notes in order for this lesson to get across to these students. And then, of course, within that structure and that script, there are moments that you can start to, play, just like any good actor, just like any good symphony performer. Scripts can be really, really useful. So that's what I say about scripting. And in terms of differentiation, I don't know. I can't imagine that these are not, don't have the ability to have kids go ahead and behind. It just does not seem possible, because every good structured literacy lesson is all about it's called basically diagnostic feedback. Constantly, the bedrock of structured literacy is diagnostic feedback. You're not teaching something to a student unless they, have demonstrated they're ready to go on to the next lesson. So that seems implausible to me. One criticism that I have heard of from Wit and Wisdom is that they actually don't have a dedicated skills curriculum that goes along with them. They have been partnering with foundations and to get really into the weeds. These skills blocks, they use something called decodable texts, which means kids don't encounter words unless they've been explicitly taught how to pronounce those words. So you're getting, and they progress. through until you've learned all the letter sound combinations. Foundations and geodes, they're only 60 to 70% decodable, which means kids might be encountering words that they haven't been explicitly taught how to decode yet. The problem with that, for kids who are flying off the charts, no problem. But for kids who are struggling, the frustration point, research has shown they actually need, the sweet spot for them is 96 to 98% decodable, in order for them to not reach a frustration point, which pushes them away. So, you know, some problems, but certainly a step in the right direction.
Okay, any more questions? Seeing none, I'm gonna move to business session. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you guys
This
so
was-
much. You guys are awesome.
Oh, no, you're doing good work out there. Continue it and just
Thank
we are, you know, we're gonna try and do our part. as
Absolutely.
too. Thank you for coming.
So much, guys.
So in business session, for those we are gonna segue to business session, and attendees are not able to participate in this. So, so now we're here, and I'll start with Keen. Would you like to say something, Keen? No, your hands are up. Okay.
Sorry.
So from what we heard, do you think we need to write a letter or resolution? I mean, Matt, you had a lot of questions. What do you
Rezo,
think we
always
should
a
do as
rezo. We speak through rezos. You know me. I'm on the rezo front. I love rezo.
Okay, so you think we need to do a reso?
I think this is like, I mean, personally, I think this is like massively important and like hidden behind data and mildly mind numbing. And I totally get that aspect of it, but it's like incredibly consequential. And as a person who has succeeded because of and in spite of my own neurodivergence, you know, it is critically important, and the results just like are insane. And so I think we should be pushing for as close to that model as possible, and you know, get incrementally better, you know, as we I would love to know if for future, I didn't want to belabor the point, but I would love to know for future meetings how the current curriculum can be improved, because I think there's a lot that obviously needs to change. But incredible job by Emily, incredible job, I'm sure, by Janine, and I'm sure
Yeah.
lots of others, Patricia, Mar, I'm sure you guys had your hands in it as well. So kudos and thank you to all, and anybody else I'm forgetting or leaving out.
Thank you for your comment. Rich?
Yeah, I'm just interested in who we would send it to. It can be more than one person, but who would, because it might affect it, right?
I would send it to the DOE, the chancellor and the mayor, with specific people at the DOE and in the mayor's office, because the chancellor is working on rolling out the citywide program. And, you know, to understand that there's success. I mean, because if let's say we're going to be sending every school within the next few years is going to be adopting structured literacy, there are still going to be kids who are struggling, who are not going to be able, who are going to need additional intervention. And those are the kind of kids who need to be served at a school that sort of provides tier 3 intervention versus tier 1 intervention.
So it would be to further encourage them to continue, or to back their support, or what would we say, since they're already doing it, or they're planning on doing it?
I mean, I guess applaud their citywide plans. I'm just thinking out loud as I'm saying this, and encourage, you know, focus on teacher funding, teacher training, looking at the data, making sure that and I'm happy to help write something, making sure that the instruction is, the curriculum is taught with fidelity. And, you know, not just, oh, we're going to teach this curriculum, but only do 40% of it, because you're obviously not going to get the results you need. There's still a lot that needs to be done at the CUNY and SUNY level on teacher training, but that might be another topic, because right now the teachers are all getting trained, you know, in these schools, in these programs. They're not leaving school with any of this expertise or experience. And obviously most, you know, a lot of teachers learn on the job. So, I mean, get experience on the job. So, but there's a lot of things that need to be improved, but and continuing to fund the expansion, you know, 1 out of 5 kids has some kind of dyslexia. Maybe 1 out of 10 kids needs, you know, more intense intervention. I'm just making up numbers. So that would be, you know, one tiny school in the South Bronx is not going to be enough.
Thanks, Janine. And thank you for volunteering to help write that reso. Matt?
So this is a bold idea, but and by bold I mean possibly silly, but I think we send it to a bunch of agency heads. I think we send it to the law department. I think we send it to CUNY. I think we send it to any agency that hires people with high school or college degrees and say, you are going to have a problem in 20 or 30 or 40 years. If not sooner. Like
Well,
kids who can't
they
read
already
will-
have a problem now.
Right, 100%. But like in my mind, I romanticize everything, but like it's a national security problem if kids can't read, right? Like the people who defend us need to be smart, and they can't be smart if they can't read. And so I think this is a much broader and more profound problem than just DOE. And so I would love to see it framed as such, but that's just my 2 cents.
Anne?
Can I make a suggestion? What if, since it sounds like the DOE and the mayor are already on board with the idea of at least beginning to implement evidence-based, science-based curriculum, what if we wrote a resolution that was about doing proper teacher training? Because what I've seen before is often they'll introduce a piece of curriculum and do like that, as Emily said, the 2-hour training. That's what I'm worried that they're going to do with this set of curriculum. They're going to do some very minimal training and then expect teachers to fully roll it out, just as they did when they introduced Heggerty and a bunch of other things where they did these phonics programs, but they didn't train the teachers properly, and the teachers ended up just basically screening videos of teachers online doing these lessons. What if we wrote a resolution encouraging them to do proper teacher training so that at least these beginning levels of teacher training can be done properly?
We like that. You will have to help contribute. Well, Janine, do you know what that looks like? And then Anne, you have to help us, you know, craft.
I mean, it's a money and a time issue, and a commitment issue. And what's nice is that each district the city's plan, I mean, the district, I know you would want it to get somebody from FACE to present about the city's plan. But, you know, each district is going to have its same curriculum. So right now you have, we're a non-adoption state, that basically means every teacher, every principal, every superintendent, you name it, can pick their own curriculum. And so there's, you know, are these perfect? Probably not. But there are economies of scale and efficiencies in terms of everyone, in terms of funding the teacher training and so forth. And so getting the UFT to stand on the stage with the mayor was a big coup, because to get the UFT behind this. So I think that's really important. But it's going to take money and it's going to take commitment. I mean, just talk about, Emily went into detail about how much training the teachers are getting at LAC, and the more training you get, and it also is not just go to a seminar and then you start teaching, you're getting coaching in the classroom, and same way the students are getting feedback, the teachers are getting feedback. So it's a coaching thing. But I just want to, Matt, your comment about, this is for every city agency. When I was looking at high schools for my kids, there's, the DOE has tons of data you can look at for every school. One of the data points I like to look at was percentage of students who are CUNY ready without remedial education. And you, I guess, would not be surprised, but I mean, there are so many schools that percentage number is really, really low. So kids are coming into high school without proper reading instruction and other skills, and that's why they need the remedial instruction. You know, yeah, and this is only getting the young kids. This is not helping the kids who are already in middle school and high school right now who need the intervention. The people like who's Patricia's son went to school with, who couldn't read in 8th grade. But I think it might make sense to invite some people from SUNY and CUNY back for a future about this. And I also want to, I'm not completely fluent on where it stands now, but at the federal level, there is some bipartisan, dyslexia intervention legislation floating around. Because guess what? There's some Republican and Democratic congressmen and senators have children who are dyslexic, and it's really not a party issue, it's an education issue. And so there might, that might be something I need to see where that stands. That's it.
Thanks, Janine. Rich, you had your hand up. Do you have another question? No? Are there any other final comments or thoughts? Because I'm being mindful of time. It's 8:14 now. Keen?
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely have to write a resolution. So any one of these is fine with me and I support it. And I think that, teacher training may be it, mandated curriculum may be it, evidence-based. I mean, Bleecker School, I mean, you guys figure out what are the pivotal things. The other thing, I think we ought to send it to the state senator people who are supportive. I mean, they also need, money is crucial in that part that comes from the state. So Brad and you, Joanne Simon, and those people need to get copy of our resolution. That's it. So,
Okay.
Patricia, tell somebody to write it and
Yeah, we're gonna, Janine volunteered to help, so it's gonna get done. And Anne is also gonna help. Thank you. So with that, the decision is made. We're doing a resolution. And I'll get it out to everybody before full board so we can vote. And with that, I'm going to adjourn this meeting. Can I get a second? Thank you. Thank you all for this wonderful conversation. And I'll be getting this out to you by email. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Good night.
Everyone.